Okay, in our last class we looked at array functions, and primarily the three that you see on the screen in front of you. So for example, the displaying of elements in an array using a loop, cut down on the size of the code, reading elements from an array, so finding an element in an array and displaying its contents, like that, and also writing new elements to an array. So once you've defined it, for example, we've defined the 4 items at the top there, you can then add further items and increase the functionality of your program. So these were all separate programs that I wanted you to type in and run and make sure they worked. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the code here into individual user-defined procedures so that you can call them from anywhere in a larger program and they will do the same function again and again without requiring any additional input from yourself. So for example, if we wanted to make a procedure for displaying elements in an array, we use the command def, and we'll just call it display array, and we'll just tab in the 3 bits of code. However, this piece of code is quite useful for everything else in the program, so I will just make that at the very top, go at the very top of the program. Okay, so that's display array, and to run display array we just have to use the calling function display array, and that should be enough for it to run. We'll see this in a second. I'm just going to move this to the bottom of our program, and we'll do the same with the rest. So reading elements from an array, we'll call it search array. Okay. And all these user-defined procedures I've deliberately not added any variables into the brackets. Okay, so there's functionality that allows you to pass values into another procedure from another part of the program. We're not looking at that just now, but just so you know, it is possible. And we'll call the last predefined procedure add to array. Now before we finish, I don't know if you noticed that the code at the bottom of add to array simply displays the contents of the array, which is basically exactly what this is doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace those 2 lines of code with the calling function display array. And again, we're narrowing down, we're reducing the amount of code that is in our Python program. So not only is our program now slightly larger than it was at the start, we've actually made it more usable, because anyone who looks at this code can see that there's functions called display array, which with our inline comments say that it displays the element in an array. This one says search array because it reads elements from an array, and then add to array writes elements to an array. So it kind of structures the program nicely without affecting the sequence of a program, because the sequence of the program occurs down here. One of the extension tasks I asked you to do was to use a selection statement in Python in order to take an option from a user and run a different procedure depending on their choice. So the first way to start, we're creating a menu here, but the best way to start it is to actually display on the screen the menu options. So we'll call it main menu. You can do this in any way you want. I'm going to make it vertical. Okay, so option 1 is display all elements in the array. Option 2 is search array, and option 3 is add element to array. Okay, you can make it as fancy as you want. You can even put that into another procedure called main menu. And that makes it very structured. Okay, so our main program now is capital letters, main menu, and then we're going to get the option from the user. So it will be an integer number. Enter your selection. 1, 2, 3. And for the purposes of this program, we're not checking for any other input. We're assuming the user will enter either 1, 2, or 3. And then we'll say if option equals 1. Then we call display array. Else if, it's called elif in Python. We're going to search the array. And if the user hasn't entered 1 and the user hasn't entered 2, then we can automatically assume that the user is going to enter 3. And that helps our program to be more robust, because it will run option 3 for anything that's typed in that's not 1 and it's not 2. And then we add to the array. And this program will only run display the main menu once. It will only ask you for an input once, and then it will only run one of display array, search array, and add to array. Let's run the program now and see what happens. Okay, so let's run the program and see what happens. So as you can see, the main menu is displayed down here. So we get 3 options: display all elements in array, search array, and add element to array. So if we try option 1 and press enter, it displays the contents of the array and stops. And as we can see, that's correct. Then we have to run the program again. Let's try option 2. Okay, this time it says enter a number between 0 and 4. It's interesting that it says between 0 and 4 when we've just noticed that the array is 0, 1, 2, and 3. Yes, it has 4 items, but a number between 0 and 4 is not quite correct. If I type in 4, for example, we get an error message because it's gone beyond the boundaries of the array. Let's run that again and type in a number that we know works. So we'll type in 3 and we'll be expecting to see Dave. The element at position 3 is Dave. So apart from a bit of user interface tweaking, the program works. Again, we're assuming that the user will only enter correct data, so we're not validating inputs at the moment. And the last option is option 3, add element to array. Asks for new data to be added. So let's just add a new name, Harry. And then as soon as we add the new element to the array, if you remember in the code, we asked it to display the array straight afterwards. And so it does. And we can now see that we have 5 elements in the array: Bob, Joy, Lindsay, Dave, and Harry. If I run that program again and ask it to display the elements in the array, do you think we'll see Harry? We don't. In case you thought it did, when the program finishes running, as it does here, all the values that have changed in the array are overwritten the next time the program is run. Because remember, if the program is run from the start, the first line sets the array myname to contain only those 4 elements. So to remember any additions, we're going to have to continue to have the program running. See if you can work that out for yourself. Concentrating on the main program and the calling function down here.